A house full of silence. The rain drummed against the windows, a steady, relentless rhythm that matched the storm inside Ethan Calloway's heart. The dim light in the kitchen flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the room. The house was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards settling beneath the weight of emptiness. Ethan sat hunched over the kitchen table, his calloused hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee. He wasn't drinking it, just holding it, staring at it, the same way he had been for the last 15 minutes. The ceramic mug still bore a faded lipstick stain. Sarah's. His late wife had sipped from this very cup the morning she died, her laughter ringing through the kitchen as she teased him about his unkempt hair. That morning was 2 years ago, but the memory still sliced through him like a freshly sharpened blade. Upstairs, the house remained just as quiet. No movement, no sound. Ethan's heart clenched. His 16-year-old daughter, Lily, had locked herself in her room again. He closed his eyes, rubbing his temples. 2 years. It had been 2 years since the accident that stole Sarah away and left Lily paralyzed from the waist down. The once lively, competitive girl who had spent her life on the track, breaking records and collecting trophies, had become a shadow of herself. She spoke only when necessary, her words sharp and defensive. The sparkle in her eyes had long since faded, replaced with something distant, something broken. Ethan had tried everything. Physical therapy, counselors, grief groups, doctors. None of it had made a difference. Lily rejected every attempt to help, meeting each effort with icy silence or cutting remarks. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, had turned into a prison of grief, and Ethan couldn't stand it anymore. His tired eyes drifted to the stack of papers in front of him, a neatly organized file, crisp white sheets against the dark wood of the table. Adoption papers. His hand trembled as he reached for the pen. It had been a desperate idea, one formed in the dead of night when sleep refused to come. If he couldn't break through Lily's walls, maybe someone else could. Maybe, just maybe, she needed someone who understood. Sophia Martinez, 15 years old, orphaned at 6, several foster homes, none permanent. The words in her case file painted a bleak picture, but what struck Ethan most were the last 2 lines in the report. Resilient, but distrustful. That word, resilient, stuck with him. Maybe Sophia wasn't just another lost girl. Maybe she was exactly what this house needed. Thunder rumbled outside, shaking the window panes. With a deep breath, Ethan pressed the pen to paper. He signed his name in firm, deliberate strokes. There was no turning back now. A new arrival. The drive to the foster care center was long and heavy with doubt. Rain cascaded down the windshield in thick sheets, making the city lights blur together in streaks of white and red. Every so often, Ethan found himself glancing at the manila folder on the passenger seat. 15 years old. Several placements. No permanent family. A girl with no roots, stepping into a house still haunted by ghosts. Was he making the right choice? Would Lily even speak to her? Would Sophia even want to stay? The car rolled to a stop in front of the care center. A plain brick building with faded blue trim. It looked more like an aging school than a place where children waited for families that never came. Ethan stepped inside, the warm air pressing against his rain-soaked coat. A middle-aged woman with a tight bun and a no-nonsense expression greeted him. "Mr. Calloway," she said, extending a firm handshake. Right on time. Her name was Mrs. Hathaway, the director of the center. "Is she ready?" Ethan asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Mrs. Hathaway nodded, her expression unreadable. "She's waiting in the next room. But I should warn you, Sophia doesn't trust easily. She's been let down too many times." Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his graying hair. "I'm not here to let her down." Mrs. Hathaway gave him a long, measuring look before leading him down a hallway lined with peeling posters and chipped paint. Then she opened the door. Sophia sat in a stiff plastic chair, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She was thin, almost too thin, with dark eyes that were far too old for her 15 years. Her black hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and the oversized hoodie she wore nearly swallowed her frame. She didn't move when Ethan stepped inside. Didn't speak, didn't even blink. Mrs. Hathaway cleared her throat. "Sophia, this is Mr. Calloway." Ethan stepped forward, extending his hand. "Please, call me Ethan." For a long moment, she just stared at him, eyes sharp and calculating. Then, finally, she reached out and shook his hand. Her grip was light, but there was something in it, something firm, something determined. Ethan wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. The car ride home. Sophia barely spoke on the way home. Ethan tried. He really did. "Do you like music?" Silence. "Are you hungry? We can stop for food." She shook her head. The only sound between them was the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers against the glass. Through the side mirror, he caught her watching him. She wasn't just sitting in silence. She was studying him, the way someone studies an unfamiliar battlefield. The houses they passed grew larger and more spread out, the roads winding, tree-lined. When Ethan pulled into his driveway, he glanced at Sophia, half expecting some reaction. Nothing. "This is home," he said, stepping out into the rain. Sophia followed, her single duffel bag slung over her shoulder. It was old and frayed at the edges, looking far too empty for 15 years of life. Ethan's stomach twisted. When they stepped inside, the house hit them with a wall of stillness, a silence so thick it felt suffocating. Then, suddenly, a loud slam from upstairs. Sophia looked up just in time to see a bedroom door shut with enough force to make the walls shake. A picture frame on the wall rattled in response. Ethan sighed. "Welcome home," he muttered. Sophia's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. The word home had never felt more foreign. The battlefield begins. The house smelled like old wood and something faintly floral. Probably the remnants of a candle Sarah had once lit, long since burned out, but never discarded. The walls were lined with framed photos, snapshots of a past that no longer existed. Ethan's late wife, Lily in her track uniform, mid-stride, frozen in time. Trophies from a life before everything changed. Sophia's fingers tightened around the strap of her duffel bag as she followed Ethan inside, her sharp eyes taking in everything. The silence in the house was heavy, pressing against her like an invisible force. And then, slam! A door upstairs. Ethan exhaled sharply, rubbing his forehead. "That's Lily," he muttered. Sophia didn't say anything, but her eyes flicked toward the staircase. She wasn't stupid. That slam wasn't just about shutting a door. It was a warning. A message. Stay out. She was used to those. "Your room is down the hall," Ethan continued, gesturing toward a door near the back of the house. "I know it's not much, but—" "It's fine," Sophia cut in, her voice flat. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "All right. I'll give you some time to settle in. Dinner's at 6. Sophia didn't acknowledge him. She just disappeared into the room, closing the door softly behind her. A house that wasn't a home. Sophia tossed her duffel bag onto the twin-sized bed, staring at the blank walls. The room was clean, sterile, like a guest room no one ever used. The bedspread was a neutral beige, the furniture basic and untouched. No personal touches, no history. It was temporary, just like every place before it. She sat down on the mattress, gripping the edge of the bed. It was soft, too soft. The kind of softness that felt unfamiliar, almost suffocating. Her fingers traced the seams of her duffel bag, finding the tiny tear she'd stitched up with borrowed thread years ago. She had learned not to unpack. Unpacking meant getting comfortable, and getting comfortable meant getting attached. A noise outside her door made her freeze. The soft hum of wheels on hardwood. Slow, purposeful. Sophia turned her head slightly, her breath held. The sound stopped just outside her door. A pause. A presence. She waited, unmoving, staring at the crack beneath the door where a faint shadow lingered. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the wheels moved again, gliding away down the hall. Sophia let out a slow breath. Dinner was a war zone. By the time Sophia made her way to the kitchen, the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. The table was already set, the warm scent of food filling the space. Ethan had gone all out. Lasagna, garlic bread, a side of roasted vegetables, a home-cooked meal. It had been years since she'd sat at a dinner table that wasn't part of a rotating foster home or a cafeteria. Lily was already there. She sat at the far end of the table, her wheelchair positioned slightly away from the others, like she wanted to leave at any moment. She didn't look up as Sophia entered, didn't acknowledge her presence at all. Her dark brown hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, and her arms were crossed over her chest. The tension in her posture was unmistakable. Sophia took a seat, her movements measured, careful. She was used to tense meals. She knew how to read a room. Ethan cleared his throat. "Well," he started, trying too hard to sound casual. "I know this is new for everyone, but I'm glad we're all here." Silence. Sophia picked at the lasagna, keeping her expression unreadable. Lily didn't touch her food. She just pushed the fork around the plate in slow, deliberate circles, carving patterns into the sauce. "So, Sophia," Ethan continued, undeterred, "what kind of music do you like?" Sophia shrugged. "Don't listen to much." "Really? No favorite band?" Another shrug. "Never had the time." Lily let out a quiet scoff, just barely audible. Sophia's jaw tightened. Ethan cleared his throat again, shifting uncomfortably. "Well, maybe. Why is she even here?" The words came sharp and sudden, cutting through the air like a blade. Ethan's face fell. "Lily, I'm serious." Lily interrupted, finally looking up, her eyes locked onto Sophia with a cold, unwavering stare. "What is she supposed to be? A replacement? A project? What?" Sophia felt her pulse spike, but she didn't let it show. She was used to hostility. Used to people pushing first, testing how much she could take. She met Lily's gaze without flinching. "I don't know. You tell me." Lily's fingers tightened around her fork, her knuckles going white. "You don't belong here." Sophia smirked slightly, leaning back in her chair. "Trust me. I don't want to be here either." Ethan ran a hand down his face. "That's enough, both of you." But neither girl broke eye contact. The challenge had been issued. The battlefield had been drawn, and Sophia had no intention of losing. Midnight silence. Sophia sat on her bed that night, staring at the ceiling. She could hear Lily moving down the hallway, the soft whir of her wheelchair cutting through the silence. Back and forth, like a caged animal. Sophia had lived with enough foster families to know what that sound meant. It wasn't restlessness. It was anger. It was grief. And it wasn't going away anytime soon. But Sophia wasn't afraid of battle. She had fought too many of them already. And if Lily wanted a war, she'd give her one. The first battle. The house was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence, the kind that hummed with life, where the air was thick with unspoken words and lingering stares. Lily had always loved silence before the accident. It was the sound of focus, of concentration, the space between breaths at the starting line, the stillness before the gunshot that sent her flying down the track. But this silence, this was suffocating. She sat in her wheelchair at the kitchen table the next morning, absently stirring her cereal, though she had no intention of eating it. The milk had already started turning warm, but she kept moving the spoon in slow, rhythmic circles. It gave her hands something to do. Across the table, Sophia sat with her arms crossed, watching her. Lily refused to look up. She could feel the weight of Sophia's gaze, measuring, waiting. Ethan was at the stove, flipping pancakes, his shoulders tense. He was trying to create some sense of normalcy, but there was nothing normal about this. He was practically drowning in the tension radiating off both girls, but he kept pretending like they were all just one big happy family. "So," he said, forcing cheer into his voice, "big plans today?" Lily didn't answer. Sophia didn't either. Ethan sighed, rubbing his temple. "Come on, you two. You're both going to be living under the same roof. Might as well." "I'm going for a run," Sophia interrupted, shoving her chair back. Lily's grip on her spoon tightened. "A run?" "Of course." Sophia shot her a glance, like she was daring Lily to say something. Lily refused to give her the satisfaction. Instead, she turned her wheelchair away from the table and rolled toward the hallway. "Good for you," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for Sophia to hear. She didn't need to turn around to know Sophia was smirking. That girl was insufferable. The old track. Sophia adjusted the laces on her sneakers, flexing her fingers as she approached the old track down the street. It wasn't as nice as the high school one. Cracked pavement, overgrown weeds along the edges, but it would do. Running was the only thing that made sense. It was the only thing that had ever made sense. The moment her feet hit the pavement, everything else faded. The house. Ethan. Lily's cold, distant stares. None of it mattered. Her body fell into rhythm, her breath steady, muscles stretching and contracting as she pushed forward. It wasn't pretty. She was out of practice. Her form was sloppy, her breathing uneven. But she kept running. Kept pounding the pavement, the sound of her heartbeat drowning out everything else. She wasn't stupid. She knew Lily hated her. And honestly, she wasn't sure she cared. Sophia had spent too many years caring about people who never stayed. Foster homes, caseworkers, people who smiled with fake sympathy but never really saw her. She had survived on her own for years. She didn't need Lily's approval. Still, there was something about the way Lily had looked at her that morning. That flash of resentment, the bitterness in her voice. It wasn't just about Sophia being in the house. No, it was about the run. Lily had once lived for the track. That much was obvious. Even without the trophies, Sophia had seen it in the way Ethan talked about her. In the way Lily carried herself, like a coiled spring, full of tension with nowhere to release it. And now, she was stuck in that wheelchair. Sophia exhaled sharply, picking up her pace. That had to feel like hell. Waging war. The first real fight happened later that afternoon. Sophia had barely stepped inside the house, still sweaty from her run, when Lily wheeled into the hallway like she'd been waiting for her. "You think you're funny, don't you?" Lily snapped, her voice like ice. Sophia arched an eyebrow. "Not particularly." Lily's hands gripped her wheelchair armrests so tightly her knuckles turned white. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" Sophia leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "And what exactly am I doing?" "You're rubbing it in my face." That took Sophia off guard. "What?" "The running." Lily spat. "Every time you lace up your shoes, every time you step outside, it's like you're trying to remind me that I can't." Sophia blinked, caught between irritation and something she couldn't quite name. "That's not what this is," she said carefully. Lily let out a hollow laugh. "Please, spare me the fake sympathy." Sophia exhaled, rubbing her temple. "Look, I get that you're pissed off at the world, but don't pin that on me." Lily's jaw tightened. "You don't get anything." Sophia stepped forward. "Really? You think you're the only one who's ever lost something?" Lily flinched. It was barely noticeable, just the tiniest shift in her posture, but Sophia saw it. For the first time, something in Lily's expression cracked. But it lasted only a second before the wall slammed back into place. "Stay out of my way," Lily said, her voice dangerously low. Sophia smirked. "Yeah, that's not happening." Lily's eyes flashed. "Excuse me?" "You don't get to decide that," Sophia said simply. "You want to be mad. Fine. Be mad. Hate me all you want. But I'm not going anywhere. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, without another word, Lily spun her wheelchair around and disappeared down the hall. Sophia exhaled slowly. The war had officially begun. The ghost of who she was. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, Lily sat in her room, staring at the trophies gathering dust on her shelf. The track had been her life. Before the accident, everything had been so clear. She had plans, dreams, a future. Now, all of that was gone. She could still hear the sound of Sophia's footsteps from earlier, pounding against the pavement. Lily clenched her jaw, gripping the arms of her wheelchair. It should have been her. She should have been the one running. The one feeling the wind against her skin, the burn in her muscles, the high of pushing her body to the limit. Instead, she was stuck. Trapped. Her own body had betrayed her, and there was no coming back from that. Except, a small voice whispered in the back of her mind. What if there was? What if she could find a way back? Not to who she used to be, but to something new. The thought terrified her. But even more terrifying was the idea that she might never try. The breaking point. The first real crack in Lily's armor didn't happen in a single moment. It wasn't a dramatic revelation or some life-changing epiphany. It was small. A flicker of hesitation. A pause where there should have been anger. And it started with a challenge. The push that started everything. Sophia had been outside training again. It was becoming routine now. The rhythmic sound of her sneakers hitting the pavement. The steady breathing. The sharp turns as she ran circles around the old, abandoned track down the street. Lily never washed. At least, that's what she told herself. But every morning, she found herself by the window, pretending to check her phone or read a book, her eyes tracking Sophia's movements with something she refused to acknowledge as envy. She hated it. Hated the way Sophia ran so easily. Hated how she seemed fine. Hated that, no matter how much she pushed Sophia away, the girl never left. And then, one afternoon, Sophia made it impossible to ignore her. She came back from her run, sweaty and breathless, and stopped right in front of Lily's wheelchair. Race me. Lily blinked. What? Sophia smirked, leaning against the wall, arms crossed like she'd already won whatever argument was about to happen. You heard me. Race me. Lily scoffed. In case you forgot, I'm in a wheelchair. Sophia shrugged. And? That wheelchair's got wheels. Last I checked, wheels can move. Lily's fingers curled around her armrest, her heart pounding in her chest. You think this is funny? No, Sophia said, her smirk fading slightly. I think you're scared. Lily's jaw clenched. There it was. The challenge. The bait. And damn it, she wanted to take it. She wanted to prove to Sophia, to herself, that she wasn't just some helpless girl sitting in a chair, waiting for life to pass her by. But she was scared. Because if she raced Sophia and lost, if she pushed herself and failed, then there'd be no more excuses, and she wasn't sure if she could handle that. You're ridiculous, Lily muttered, spinning her chair toward the hallway. I'll be at the track tomorrow at 5, Sophia called after her. Show up if you want. Lily didn't respond, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Memories that wouldn't stay buried. That night, Lily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She hated how easy everything had been before. Back then, running was simple. Her body knew what to do. It was muscle memory, instinct, the only thing that had ever made sense. She remembered the feeling of wind against her skin, the rhythmic pounding of her feet on the track, the rush of adrenaline as she surged forward, pushing herself harder, faster. Stop. She exhaled sharply, trying to push the memories away. They weren't helping. They weren't real anymore. She turned onto her side, trying to ignore the way her chest ached. The track wasn't for her anymore, and she needed to accept that. But she couldn't stay away. The next morning, Lily didn't go to the track. She told herself she wouldn't. But by the time the clock hit 5:30, she was outside. Not at the track. Just watching. Sophia was already there, running drills. She was fast. Not Olympic fast, not yet, but hungry. Like someone running toward something, or away from it. She was sweating, her breathing heavy as she sprinted down the lane, turning with sharp precision before pushing herself forward again. Lily should have left. Should have turned around before Sophia saw her. But she didn't. And of course, because the universe hated her, Sophia caught sight of her immediately. The girl didn't say anything at first. She just jogged toward her, slowing her pace as she reached Lily's chair. "You showed up," Sophia said, not even out of breath. Lily scowled. "I was just passing by." Sophia grinned. "Sure you were." Lily glared, refusing to acknowledge the way her pulse spiked. Sophia wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, then nodded toward the track. "Race me." Lily should have said no. She should have rolled away. Instead, she exhaled sharply and wheeled herself onto the track. The race that changed everything. The starting line felt different than she remembered. Before, she used to bounce on her toes, shifting her weight, mentally preparing herself for the sprint ahead. Now she just sat there. It felt wrong. Sophia crouched beside her, her hands on her knees. "We go to the end of the lane. First one there wins." Lily kept her face blank. "What do I get when I win?" Sophia grinned. "Confidence." Lily snorted. "You really think you're some kind of motivational speaker, huh?" Sophia just shrugged. 3, 2, 1, go. Lily pushed forward, her arms burning as she propelled herself down the track. It wasn't fast. It wasn't pretty. But damn it, she was moving. Sophia ran beside her, not at full speed, but not letting her win either. Lily gritted her teeth, pushing harder, her breath coming in sharp bursts. Her arms weren't used to this. Her body screamed in protest. But she kept going. The finish line was close, so close she could almost taste it. And then, suddenly, her hands slipped, her wheels jerked, and she lost control. She tipped. Her wheelchair lurched sideways, her body falling. The ground rushed up to meet her, and then, pain. Sharp and unforgiving. Her palms scraped against the track, her elbows slamming into the pavement with a sickening jolt. Silence. Then, footsteps. Sophia was by her side in an instant. "Lily." "I'm fine," Lily snapped, even though her vision blurred for a second. She wasn't fine. Her pride had just been shattered. She felt stupid. Like a joke. Like a failure. Sophia hesitated, then knelt beside her. "You okay?" Lily squeezed her eyes shut, her heart pounding. And then, to her own horror, she felt tears. Hot, angry ones, burning behind her eyelids. Sophia didn't say anything. She just sat there. And for some reason, that made it worse. "I can't do this," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. Sophia's voice was soft. "Not yet." Lily opened her eyes, glaring at her. Don't what? Don't give me some inspirational speech about how I just have to believe in myself." Sophia tilted her head. "Okay. Then I'll just say this. You didn't quit. Even when you fell. Even when it hurt, you still tried." Lily turned away. Sophia stood up and held out a hand. Lily hesitated. Then, slowly, she took it. Sophia helped her back into the wheelchair. And something shifted. Something small. Something huge. Lily didn't say thank you. But she didn't roll away either. And Sophia, she just smiled. Because she knew. This was only the beginning. The fire awakens. The track was quiet except for the steady sound of Sophia's breathing and the soft hum of the wind rustling through the trees. Lily sat in her wheelchair, her hands still gripping the armrests, her knuckles white. The sting of fresh scrapes burned against her skin, but that wasn't what made her throat tight. It was the failure. The reminder that no matter how much she wanted it, no matter how much she tried, she would never be the same again. She should have known better. She should have never even tried. Sophia stood beside her, her presence an annoying weight, an unwanted witness to Lily's humiliation. But she wasn't saying anything. She wasn't offering pity, wasn't giving her some empty speech about how she just needed to keep going or push through the pain. She was just there. And for some reason, that was worse. Finally, Lily let out a sharp exhale. "This was stupid," she muttered, her voice tight. Sophia tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Was it?" Lily shot her a glare. "Yes, and don't try to argue with me, or I swear to." "I wasn't going to argue," Sophia said, shrugging. "I was just going to say, you fell." Lily's jaw clenched. "Yeah, no kidding. But you tried." Lily's heart skipped a beat. That word. Tried. She wasn't sure how long it had been since she'd actually tried at anything. Not in therapy. Not at school. Not with Ethan. Not with herself. Sophia took a step back, stretching her arms behind her head like she had all the time in the world. "Look, you can be pissed at yourself. You can decide this was a mistake. But that doesn't change the fact that for the first time since I got here, I actually saw you give a damn." Lily turned away, trying to ignore the way her chest ached. Sophia's voice softened. "And I think that scares you more than falling did." Lily hated how right she was. She hated it. A different kind of battle. The ride home was quiet. Not tense, not hostile. Just silent. Ethan noticed immediately. He glanced at both girls as they entered the house, his eyebrows raised, but he didn't say anything. He had learned by now not to push too hard. Lily went straight to her room, closing the door behind her. She didn't slam it. She didn't lock it. She just sat there in the quiet, her hands resting on the wheels of her chair. The weight of today settled deep into her bones. She wasn't angry at Sophia. Not really. She was angry at herself. For falling. For failing. For hoping. But even through all that anger, a tiny ember still burned. A dangerous ember. One that whispered, "What if you tried again?" She forced herself to ignore it. But it didn't go away. The conversation she didn't want. Later that night, Lily rolled into the kitchen, her body stiff from the earlier fall. She grabbed a glass of water, trying not to wince when she moved her arms. Sophia was sitting at the counter, scrolling through her phone. But when Lily entered, she put it down. Lily hesitated. Sophia didn't smirk this time. Didn't push. She just said, "How's your elbow?" Lily's fingers instinctively brushed against the bruised skin. "It's fine." A beat of silence. Then Sophia leaned back against the chair, her expression unreadable. "You know, I don't actually care if you ever race again." Lily blinked. That caught her off guard. "You don't?" Sophia shook her head. "Nope. That's your decision. Not mine. But I do care if you stop fighting for yourself." Lily swallowed hard. "You don't even know me." "Maybe not," Sophia admitted. "But I know what it looks like when someone is waiting to disappear." Lily's chest tightened. Because, for the first time in a long time, she realized. Sophia wasn't just seeing her. She was recognizing her, and that terrified her more than anything else. The shift. The next morning, Lily did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She wheeled herself outside. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because the house felt too small. Maybe it was because she was sick of looking at the same 4 walls. Or maybe, just maybe, she wasn't ready to let that ember go out. Sophia was already outside, stretching for her morning run. She paused when she saw Lily. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lily exhaled and said, "Show me how to turn better." Sophia's eyebrows shot up. Lily rolled her shoulders. "I kept tipping over yesterday. I need to fix that." A slow smile spread across Sophia's face. And just like that, the war changed. It wasn't a fight between them anymore. It was a fight against something bigger. And for the first time in a long time, Lily wasn't alone in it. The fire that won't go out. The morning air was thick with the scent of wet grass and freshly turned earth. The storm from the previous night had left everything damp, making the pavement slick, but Lily didn't care. She was outside. By choice. It wasn't much. Just a few feet from the porch. But it felt different than all the other times she had been wheeled out by therapists or coaxed into fresh air by Ethan. This time, she had pushed herself. Sophia stood a few feet away, tying her shoelaces, her usual smirk nowhere in sight. She seemed to know instinctively that this wasn't the time for jokes or challenges. This was Lily's moment. Lily's hands tightened on the wheels of her chair. "I need to figure out how to turn without tipping over," she said, her voice steady. Sophia nodded, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead. "All right, let's start slow." Lily exhaled and positioned herself, trying to ignore the feeling creeping up her spine. The old excitement, the itch to compete, the instinct that had once driven her to win race after race. That part of her was gone. "Right?" She pushed forward, her arms burning as she propelled the chair forward. The wheels glided smoothly across the pavement until she reached the edge of the driveway. Then came the turn. She leaned slightly, gripping the wheels, shifting her weight. The chair tilted dangerously to the left. Her heart jumped into her throat, panic surging through her body. And then, at the last second, Sophia's hand shot out, catching the back of the chair. "Too much lean," she said casually, as if Lily hadn't just almost crashed. Lily's pulse pounded. She hated this, hated feeling helpless. But she didn't quit. She reset. Tried again. Another turn. Another near fall. Sophia caught her again. "You're fighting the chair," she said. "You have to work with it, not against it." Lily exhaled sharply. "Easy for you to say." Sophia just grinned. "You ever tried running with bad shoes?" Lily blinked. "What?" "Bad shoes. The kind with no support. The kind that fight your movements instead of helping them." Lily hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." "And what do you do?" "You adjust," Lily muttered, realization sinking in. Sophia clapped her hands together. "Exactly. You adjust to the chair, not the other way around. Feel the movement instead of fighting it." Lily clenched her jaw. It sounded so simple when Sophia said it, but her body wasn't cooperating. Still, she tried again. The fight to move forward. The next few days blurred into a new routine. Every morning, Lily wheeled herself outside. Every morning, Sophia was waiting. They trained, not like before, when it had just been Sophia running and Lily watching from the sidelines. Now, it was both of them. Lily practiced turns, balance, speed. She learned how to adjust, how to use her arms efficiently without burning out too quickly. It was frustrating, humiliating. More than once, she wanted to throw something, to quit. But she didn't, and neither did Sophia. She never mocked Lily's failures, never acted like she was doing her a favor. She just trained with her, like equals. And that made all the difference. The night that changed everything. One evening, after a particularly grueling practice, Lily sat on the porch, wiping sweat from her brow. Her muscles ached in ways they hadn't in years, her arms trembling from exhaustion. Sophia plopped down next to her, stretching her legs. "You know," she said, glancing at Lily, "you're kind of terrifying when you focus." Lily snorted. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Sophia smirked. "No, it's a runner thing." Lily stilled. The words hit harder than they should have. Runner. It had been so long since someone had called her that. She looked down at her hands, at the calluses beginning to form from pushing the wheels over and over. Runner. Could she be that again? Did she even want to? Sophia must have seen the conflict in her eyes because she leaned back, staring at the sky. "You don't have to decide now," she said casually. But I think you already know the answer. Lily swallowed hard. She wasn't sure if that was true. But she wasn't sure it was wrong either. The whisper of a challenge. The next day, Sophia was late for training. Lily waited and waited. The sun was already rising high, and she was about to go inside when Sophia appeared, wheeling something into the yard. A chair. But not just any chair. A racing wheelchair. Sleek, lightweight, built for speed. Lily's heart stopped. No, no way. She shook her head. Absolutely not. Sophia grinned, undeterred. Scared. Lily glared. I'm not scared. I'm just. She exhaled sharply, looking away. This isn't me anymore. Sophia crossed her arms. Yeah. Then why do you look like you want to try it? Lily clenched her jaw. Her fingers itched to touch the chair, to feel the smooth metal beneath her hands, to see if it would be the same as before. She hated that she wanted it. Sophia's voice softened. One ride. Lily. Just one. Lily hesitated. Then, against every screaming voice in her head, she wheeled forward. She transferred into the chair, her heart racing before she even moved. It felt different. Not bad. Not good. Just different. Sophia crouched beside her, just like before. Feel the movement. Work with it. Lily's breath shook. She placed her hands on the wheels. And then, she pushed. The chair shot forward, faster than she expected. Her heart leaped into her throat as she adjusted, gripping the wheels tighter, her arms moving on instinct. The pavement blurred beneath her. The wind brushed against her skin. She turned, perfectly. She wasn't fighting the chair. She was working with it. And for the first time since the accident, she felt free. She reached the end of the driveway, skidding slightly to a stop, her breathing ragged, her hands trembling. Sophia jogged up beside her. So, Lily swallowed hard. She couldn't speak, couldn't put the feeling into words. But she didn't have to. Because, for the first time, she didn't just feel like a girl in a wheelchair. She felt like a runner. The final race. The sun was just beginning to rise, streaks of pink and gold stretching across the sky, as Lily adjusted her grip on the wheels of the racing chair. It had been a week since she'd first tried it. A week of waking up before dawn, pushing herself harder than she had in 2 years. A week of sore arms, bruised palms, and sweat-soaked exhaustion. But also, a week of something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. She wasn't just moving anymore. She was training. Ethan had noticed the change almost immediately. He had watched from the porch every morning, coffee mug in hand, his face caught somewhere between amazement and cautious hope. He never said much, just nodded in approval whenever she came inside, breathless and exhausted. But Sophia pushed her. She ran alongside Lily every morning, shouting instructions, forcing her to go faster, to be sharper, to keep pushing through the burn. And Lily hated her for it, and loved her for it, because she knew Sophia wasn't letting her win. She was treating her like a competitor, like an athlete, like she was still Lily Calloway, the runner. The marathon. Ethan pulled into the crowded parking lot, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel. The event was bigger than Lily expected. Hundreds of runners warming up, volunteers setting up water stations, spectators already gathering along the sidelines. Her stomach twisted. She hadn't raced in years. And now she was about to compete in a marathon. Not a full one, thank God. Just a 10K para race. But still, her pulse thundered as she stared at the course map, tracing the route with her finger. It was longer than anything she'd done in training, and in the back of her mind, that old fear crept in. What if she wasn't ready? What if she fell? What if she failed? She clenched her jaw. No, not this time. She had already failed once. She wasn't going to do it again. Sophia appeared beside her, already stretching. Nervous. Lily rolled her shoulders. No. Sophia gave her a look. Liar. Lily exhaled sharply. Fine. Maybe a little. Sophia grinned. Good. Means you care. Lily scowled, but she couldn't argue. She did care. And that scared her more than anything. The starting line. The other para-athletes lined up beside Lily at the start. Some were in wheelchairs like hers. Others had prosthetic legs. A few had guides, their hands gripping elastic bands tied to their partners' wrists. They all had the same look in their eyes. Determination. Purpose. Lily inhaled sharply, adjusting her gloves. Sophia crouched beside her. Remember, pace yourself at the start. You can push hard at the end. Lily nodded, gripping the wheels tightly. The official raised the starting gun. The crowd fell silent. Lily's heart pounded. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Bang. She launched forward. The race. The first mile was chaos. Racers jostled for position, wheels bumping, bodies shifting, everyone fighting for space. Lily focused on her form, keeping her pushes steady, just like Sophia had drilled into her. The wind whipped past her face. The world blurred around her, and for the first time in 2 years, she felt alive. Sophia ran alongside her, keeping pace. Steady, she called out. You're doing great. Lily barely heard her. She was locked in, focused, pushing. She overtook one racer, then another. The pain in her arms burned like fire, but she embraced it. She had spent 2 years feeling nothing. She welcomed the pain. It meant she was still here, still fighting. Mile 3 passed in a blur. Then mile 4. Then disaster. The fall. Sophia's breath hitched beside her. Lily glanced over, just in time to see Sophia stumble. Her knee buckled, her body tilted, and suddenly she was falling. Lily's stomach dropped. She yanked her wheels to a stop, the chair skidding against the pavement. Sophia hit the ground hard. Lily's breath came in short gasps as she stared at her sister, not moving. The race kept going. Runners passed them. Spectators watched. Lily's mind screamed at her, go, keep going, win. But she couldn't, because 2 years ago she had fallen, and nobody had waited for her. She wasn't going to do the same to Sophia. She unstrapped herself. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she crawled out of the racing chair. Pain shot up her arms, but she ignored it. She dragged herself forward, grabbing Sophia's shoulders. Sophia, she choked out. Come on, get up. Sophia groaned, wincing. Her ankle. It was twisted. She couldn't run. She couldn't finish. Lily's breath came fast and sharp. She looked ahead. The finish line was still a mile away. They could quit. They could stop. But Lily refused. She met Sophia's eyes, fire burning behind her own. Come on, she said. We're finishing this. Together. Sophia let out a weak laugh. You're insane. Lily grinned. Yeah, I am. She climbed back into her chair. Then she reached out her hand. Sophia hesitated. Then she grabbed it. Lily tightened her grip. And together, they moved. Lily pushed forward, her arms screaming in protest. Sophia limped beside her, using Lily's momentum to keep going. The crowd went wild. Chants of go, go, go erupted all around them. The finish line got closer. Lily gritted her teeth, using every last ounce of strength she had. She was not stopping. Not now. Not ever again. The pain was unbearable, but the moment was everything. And then, they crossed the finish line. Together. The miracle. Lily barely processed what happened next. The crowd erupted. Ethan ran to them, his face filled with tears and pride. Sophia collapsed onto the pavement, laughing breathlessly. Lily sat in her chair, her entire body shaking, her hands aching, her heart pounding. She had done it. She had finished. She wasn't just a girl in a wheelchair anymore. She was an athlete. She was a runner. She was Lily Calloway. And for the first time in 2 years, she wasn't broken anymore. She was whole. She was free.